Hello and welcome to my boss guide series for the Bastion of Twilight, where I've compiled existing information combined with raid testing done on the beta to present these fights in a modern, up-to-date format. Before we get started, if you find this guide helpful, consider dropping a like, subscribing, and sharing this video with a friend. Otherwise, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoy. Valiona and Theralion are a pair of dragons that make up the second encounter in the Bastion of Twilight. The two bosses have a shared health pool with a 10-minute enrage timer. You'll want 2 tanks, 5 to 7 healers, and the rest DPS. Note there is a lot of raid damage going out during this encounter. Because the enrage timer is quite long, consider running more healers early on during progression. This fight has 2 phases and 2 phase transitions that revolve around the 2 dragons having different abilities depending on which one is grounded and which one is flying around. So let's first go over their respective mechanics. While Valiona is grounded, she uses the following. Blackout. Absorbs 75,000 healing, and when either dispelled or it expires, causes 1 million shadow damage split between all nearby players. Devouring Flames. This is a big 180-degree frontal that deals heavy damage which drops off the further away you are. And Twilight Shift. This is a heroic only debuff that gets applied to the main tank. At 5 stacks, Shifting Reality deals 15,000 shadow damage to the tank and any players within 8 yards, sending them to the Twilight Realm. Keep the Twilight Realm in mind, we'll come back to it later. During this time, Theralion is in the air using the following. Twilight Blast. Theralion targets a random player, dealing moderate damage to the target and any players within 8 yards. Dazzling Destruction. Spawns 3 sets of 2 swirlies, dealing large damage to any players within them. This ability also marks the changing of phases, so we'll refer to it as the first phase transition. Once the cast finishes, the dragons swap places with Theralion joining the fray and Valiona flying away. Theralion now uses the following abilities. Engulfing Magic. This is a reflect type debuff that causes your damage or healing to deal 100% more of that amount to any allies within 10 yards. Fabulous Flames. Theralion targets a random player, placing a pool of flame at their location. Then, on Heroic, like Valiona, Theralion will also apply Twilight Shift and Shifting Reality to the main tank. Speaking of, Valiona uses the following. Twilight Meteorite. This ability marks a random player, and after 6 seconds, inflicts heavy damage that is split among anyone within 6 yards. And Deep Breath. Covers 1/3 of the room in fire, dealing large damage to any players within it. Like Dazzling Flames, this ability also marks the changing of phases, so we refer to it as the second phase transition. Lastly, and before we talk strategy, let's break down the Twilight Realm. Note that this discussion only pertains to the heroic version of the fight. There is no Twilight Realm on normal. While in the physical realm, any players hit by Dazzling Destruction, Deep Breath, or Shifting Reality get sent to the Twilight Realm. While here, players will gain the Twilight Zone debuff, taking increasing periodic damage the longer they spend in this realm. Players must also now dodge orbs, which detonate when touched, and avoid Deep Breath and Dazzling Destruction. Getting hit by either of these abilities in the Twilight Realm means instant death. Finally, adds will continuously spawn that channel Rift Blast on random players in the physical realm. DPS need to focus these adds down, otherwise the raid damage will become unhealable. To leave the Twilight Realm, portals will appear that players can take to return to the physical realm. But be mindful, these portals are not permanent, and will periodically change position. We'll refer to Valiona being grounded as Phase 1, and Theralion being grounded as Phase 2. The fight begins in Phase 1. Tank the boss in the center of the room, with melee on its butt and your range and healers spread out 8 yards all around the boss, but try not to be too far away as we'll need to dodge the boss's frontal and stack in melee for blackout. This hits pretty hard, so consider using a healer or ray cooldown here. On Heroic, when the tank reaches 4 stacks of Twilight Shift, have a small group with a few DPS and at least one healer stack on the tank to get sent to the Twilight Realm for the 5th stack. This also serves as a taunt swap, so have your off tank taunt off the main tank once they've received their 5th stack. Players sent to the Twilight Realm must DPS as many of the adds as possible before stacks of Twilight Zone become unhealable, at which point they take a portal out and return to the physical realm. Rogues, paladins, and mages are strong here, as they can use immunities to drop stacks. 90 seconds into the fight, Theralion casts Dazzling Destruction. Dodge the swirlies. If you get hit by accident, just take the portal back up to the physical realm. This also signifies the first phase transition, and the second phase begins immediately afterwards. While Theralion is grounded, have your range spread out to reduce the number of people hit by Fabulous Flames, and to reduce the potential damage of Engulf magic. Finally, range players targeted by Twilight Meteor must run into and stack with melee DPS. This ability doesn't hit as hard as Blackout, so rather than having the entire raid stack, simply being on top of the melee will suffice. Otherwise, on Heroic, prepare a second, different team to go down to the Twilight Realm for Shifting Twilight. We cannot recycle players from Team 1 because of the stacking debuff that gets applied. But again, classes with immunities can be an exception here. 90 seconds after the start of Phase 2, Valiona uses Deep Breath. This ability works much like the Felmist Breath in Sunwell Plateau, doing a total of 3 breaths over one of 3 different locations in the room. We'll call them entrance, middle, and far. This is also a great mechanic to utilize the newly added world markers. These locations are premeditated by the direction Valiona flies prior to doing a breath, so be sure to have at least one of your raiders watching and communicating these breaths to the raid. After 3 breaths, the fight transitions back into Phase 1. These 2 phases and phase transitions will repeat for the rest of the fight. Manage this successfully and the boss should go down. Now, one final note regarding the Twilight teams for Heroic. You may optionally choose to send players down during the phase transitions. So, instead of having players assigned to the Twilight Realm stack on the tank and go down with Shifting Reality, they instead intentionally stand in Dazzling Destruction or Deep Breath. Either method is totally viable, just make sure players don't accidentally stand in either of these abilities while in the Twilight Realm, as doing so will one-shot you. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.